Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, depending on the part of the world you're located right now. And welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Gabriel Chavez, and I am the Sustainable Sourcing Manager at the Global Coffee Platform. I'll have the pleasure of hosting you during today's webinar, where we're officially launching the public consultation for the review of the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code and the Equivalence Mechanism. From now on, we will refer to them as the Coffee SR Code and the EM. Today's session will focus on the proposed updates to the Coffee SR Code and the EM. They were completed so far through the review process and how stakeholders from across the coffee sector can engage and provide feedback during the consultation period. Before we continue, as always with GCP webinars, I'd like to briefly remind everyone of GCP's competition law and antitrust policy. You'll see the policies summarized on the slide, and we ask everyone to please take a short moment to read it carefully. We will not have any discussions related to prices, market allocations, or any other commercial sensitive topics. If at any point during this webinar anyone feels that the discussion is moving in that direction, please flag it immediately so we can course correct. I'd also like to note that this session is being recorded and will be shared to GCP's public channels. In addition, AI-generated caption translations are available for convenience during the webinar. However, the official language of this session is English, and in case of any discrepancies, the English version will prevail. Please feel free to use the chat to make us know about your questions and comments along the session. There is time allocated by the end of our call today to answer those questions. With that, let's continue. So to give you a quick overview on what we'll be covering today, here is our agenda. We'll begin with a short introduction and webinar objectives, followed by an overview of the GCP tools currently under review and the status of the revision process so far. We'll then move into the public consultation itself, including the consultation materials, timelines, and how stakeholders can engage and provide feedback through the consultation period. We'll close with an open Q&A discussion, next steps, and final remarks. Just a few housekeeping rules before we continue. Please keep yourself muted. We're not speaking. Feel free to turn your camera during the session. We encourage you to add your organization name to your screen name. Please use the raise hand function if you would like to intervene during the discussion. And please use the chat to let you know about some questions or comments you might have. And finally, please remember to silence your phone and minimize distractions as much as possible. Right now, to open today's session and help frame why the review matters for the coffee sector at this moment, I'm very pleased to hand over to our GCP Technical Committee Chair, Jeremy Lafray. Jeremy, over to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Gabriel, and welcome to everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is a really important session because it comes in the middle of a process, which is the review of the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code and the Equivalence Mechanism. And they have become established tools for a common understanding of coffee sustainability over the past 5 years. If we look at where we are now, there are no fewer than 33 schemes which are currently recognised under the Equivalence Mechanism, 4 of which are third party and 29 a second party. And the purchases of coffee recorded, purchases of sustainable coffee recorded have risen from about 639,000 tonnes in 2018 up to 1.73 million tonnes in 2024, which I think is a tremendous sign of the seriousness with which our industry takes coffee sustainability. So what I would like to do today is really encourage you all to give your feedback. You're going to hear shortly a description of the work that's been done, the way in which it's been done. I would like to thank particularly the colleagues on the technical committee, some of whom are with us on this call, who've really looked at the proposals for change in great detail and have given their feedback. and also the advisory task force, which has helped in that as well. We've had very wide representation from the industry, and I'm most grateful to them for their time and their efforts and their expertise. And now it's over to you. It's over to the wider membership as a whole to ensure that the tools, these two tools, the SR code and the equivalence mechanism, remain practical, relevant, and credible. Because it's so important that what we have is something that the industry can really use and that has credibility among consumers and producers for whom we are working across the world. With that, thank you very much, Gabrielle. Again, a very warm welcome. Thank you for your time, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for these nice intro words. Right, with that, we shall continue with the presentation. Now, we'd like to start with a quick poll to better understand who is joining us today and the diversity of perspectives represented in this consultation process. So the question is, which best describes your role in the coffee sector? The poll might be available for you now.
We just having a technical issue. We shall launch it in a couple of seconds while you think about what best describes your role. Angelica, are you able to launch it, please? Or Agnes? Excellent, thank you.
We're starting to get some answers. Yeah, so we are close to half of participants right now. So it's a really nice mixture. We have almost 30% of producers and farmers, 32% trader, roaster retailers, 21 sustainability standards, 5% NGOs, 50% others, and no government public sector. Still, I think it's really great to see such a diverse group represented here today, because this really reflects the multi-stakeholder nature of the coffee sector and why broad participation is so important for this review process. Let's give it maybe 1 second more because we're good so far. Yeah, so mostly producers, traders, roaster retailers, and sustainability standards. Great. Great. Thank you very much for your answers. With that, we will move on. So it is important to mention that this webinar takes place as part of GCP's regular 5-year review cycle for the COFSR code and equivalence mechanism, aligned with good international practices included in the ISO Code of Good Practice. The purpose of today's session is to provide a clear overview of the review process and officially launch the public consultation phase. Specifically, our objectives today are: first, to provide an overview of the review of the code and the EM, including why this process matters for the coffee sector at this moment. Second, explain how the consultation draft was developed, including the work completed so far, the stakeholder engagement process, and the key insights gathered through the assessment phase. Third, introduce the public consultation itself, including the consultation toolkit, the proposed updates on the review, and the materials available to support participation. Fourth, guide participants on how to engage and provide feedback through the consultation period, including timelines, participation channels, and access to the consultation service. And finally, highlight the importance of bringing together diverse expertise and perspectives from across the coffee sector to help shape the final version of the COFSR code and the equivalence mechanism. We also hope to use today's session to surface questions, reflections, and implementation perspectives that can further support the next phase of the review process. Now, before going into the review process itself, it is important to briefly step back and look at the broader sustainable sourcing approach behind these tools, the intended objectives, and how they work together within the coffee sector. This next section provides a quick overview of the COFSR code, the equivalence mechanism, and the role they play within GCP's integrated sustainable sourcing approach. So the COFSR code is built around 4 core objectives, originally set in 2020, which define its intended impact pathways. In the short term, it is designed to provide a common language to describe and assess coffee sustainability, In the medium term, it aims to improve coordination and alignment with supply chain partners and to enable companies to increase sourcing from suppliers that meet baseline sustainability expectations. In the long term, it is intended to contribute to improve sustainability, performance, and resilience for producers participating in Coffee Code aligned programs. The Equivalence Mechanism is also built around a clear set of objectives that define its intended impact. In the short term, it is designed to establish a robust and independent benchmarking process against the code and to increase confidence in GCP recognized schemes. In the medium term, it aims to increase sourcing from GCP recognized schemes and to increase sustainable coffee purchases volumes through those schemes. In the long term, it is intended to improve sustainability, performance, and resilience for producers participating in recognized schemes. So, global coffee sector is facing right now a set of shared and increasingly complex sustainability challenges. These include farmer prosperity and resilience, climate pressures, evolving market expectations, and growing regulatory demands. In response to this context, GCP has developed an integrated sustainable sourcing approach that provides a foundation for coordinated and sector-wide action, rather than fragmented company-by-company responses. This approach is built on three interconnected pillars that work together: the code, which provides a shared sector-wide language; the equivalence mechanism, which recognizes sustainability schemes as equivalent to the code; and the Sustainable Coffee Purchases Report, which provides a collective annual view of sustainable sourcing. These three tools are designed to work together as a system. That's why updating both the code and the equivalence mechanism at the same time is so important. It helps keep the baseline current, ensures incredible schemes recognition, and supports alignment between sourcing practices, reporting approaches, and today's sustainability priorities across the sector. Now I'll move us into the next section of today's agenda, where we'll walk through the review of the code and the EM, including the rationale, scope, governance, and overall process behind this work. This combined review of the Coffee Code and the EM is being carried out under a clear mandate from the GCP board. The board agreed to review these two tools together because of their closely interconnected nature and to ensure that GCP continue delivering on its 2030 goal in a coherent, credible, and effective way across the sector. By reviewing the code and the EM together, GCP aims to improve alignment across the sustainable sourcing approach, create greater efficiency in the review process, and reduce stakeholder fatigue by avoiding separate parallel review process. The process includes a comprehensive landscape analysis, technical input, stakeholder consultation, and broad agreement across the coffee sector. All of this work is intended to lead to updated tools by the end of 2026, together with clearer implementation pathways for both scheme owners and users across the sector, helping support practical, credible, and consistent uptake moving forward. So just very briefly, these are the guiding principles for how we are approaching this review. At a high level, this includes being farmer-centric, inclusive, focus on continuous improvement, aligned with existing initiatives, and grounded in transparency, learning, and openness to engagement. I will spend too many time now on this, but these principles underpin the way we're designing and delivering the review process. Here we have the overall scope of the review, covering both the Coffee Code and the equivalence mechanism. Starting with the code, the review is being carried out in line with the ISO Code of Good Practice and focus on ensuring that the code remains relevant, practical, and aligned with evolving sector expectations. This includes reflecting current sustainability and regulatory developments, such as emerging due diligence approaches, EUDR, and ongoing sector discussions around trending topics like green coffee and continuous improvement approaches. For the EM, the review is being carried out in two phases. The current phase focuses on the operational requirements of the equivalence mechanism, while a second phase later in the year will focus more specifically on implementation aspects. This work is informed by feedback from GCP recognized schemes, users of the equivalence mechanism, implementation experiences, and evolving good international practices related to governance, assurance, transparency, and accountability. Across both reviews, the process includes input from GCP members, recognized schemes, partners, technical experts, and stakeholders from across the wide coffee sector. A key objective through the process is to maintain business, relevance, and practical applicability across different actors and contexts within the coffee supply chain. This slide provides a high-level overview of the overall timeline and where we currently are in the process. So the review formally began with laying the groundwork phase, which took place from September to December 2025. This phase was focused on a strategic scoping, defining the review process and governance structure, including the roles of the GCP Technical Committee, the creation of an advisory task force. During this phase, GCP also carried out initial surveys, interviews, and early engagement with recognized schemes and stakeholders, alongside a broader landscape and white paper analysis to better understand lessons learned, emerging sustainability expectations, implementation experiences, and evolving regulatory developments. Following this initial assessment and scoping work, the process moved into the drafting and consultation phase through 2026. Today, with the launch of this webinar, we're officially entering the public consultation phase from May until June. The focus during this period is to gather feedback from stakeholders across the coffee sector and beyond on the proposed updates to the code and the equivalence mechanism. Once the consultation closes, the process will move into the next phase of analysis, review, and further drafting during the second half of the year. This includes reviewing and consolidating all stakeholder feedback received, identifying key themes and recommendations, and developing the next iteration of the updated drafts. Those revised drafts will continue going through technical discussion and validation processes with the technical committee, the advisory task force, and the GCP board if needed. Finally, the objective is to complete the final review, approval, and publication of the updated tools by the end of 2026, together with clearer implementation and transition pathways for scheme owners and users across the sector. Through the entire process, stakeholder engagement remains inclusive and multi-layered. Engagement opportunities include surveys, interviews, webinars, workshops, consultations, and outreach through country platforms and sector networks, helping ensure broad participation, regional relevance, and practical input across the coffee sector. On the roles and governance structure for the review, the GCP Secretariat facilitates and supports the entire process, helping to coordinate, convene, and ensure smooth implementation. The Secretariat is carrying out this work with the support of Amy Rosillo, external consultant from Lysith Consulting, which is here today as well, and actually is going to be an active part of our Q&A section. So once again, we invite you to provide your questions and comments in the chat when you consider it. The GCP plays a central role in providing technical expertise and validation at critical steps through the process. Also, the technical committee helps ensure the proposals are feasible, credible, and aligned with sector needs, and it makes strategic recommendations to the GCP board. The advisory task force acts as a sounding board of the technical committee. They will bring in additional input, perspective, and expertise from interested stakeholders, and they may also split into subgroups focused specifically on the code or the EM as part of the strategic scoping. Finally, the GCP board has the formal role of approving the final outcomes of the review based on the recommendations from the technical committee. Looking a bit more specifically at the technical committee, this is a standing governance body within GCP composed of representatives with expertise from across different parts of the coffee sector and sustainability landscape. As you can see on the slide, the committee includes expertise from producing countries, sustainability schemes, research, trade, and implementation experience. The role through this process is to help ensure that proposed updates remain practical, credible, and aligned with sector realities and needs. In addition to the technical committee, GCP also established the advisory task force specifically to support the review process. The task force brings together additional expertise and perspectives from across the coffee value chain, including roasters, traders, sustainability experts, and GCP recognized schemes. Its role is advisory rather than decision-making, helping provide input challenge assumptions, and strengthen the quality and practicality of the proposed revisions. Additional ad hoc expertise must be also brought into the process when specific technical topics or areas require further support. So the assessment phase was a critical component of the overall review process, and it was fully designed with the ISO Code of Good Practice, which emphasized the importance of understanding the effectiveness of standards and identifying opportunities for continuous improvement. This phase focused on assessing how the code and the EM are functioning in practice, including if they are delivering on the objectives and impact pathways originally envisioned through GCP's theory of change. The review assessed the relevance, coherence, and effectiveness of both tools through structured stakeholder engagement and evidence gathering. This included surveys, interviews, workshops, and analysis of implementation experiences, review of existing tools and documentation, and a broader landscape analysis of sector trends and regulatory developments. The objective of this phase was to build a strong evidence-based understanding of how the Officer Code and the EM are currently being used, where they are adding value, and where there are opportunities to strengthen clarity, usability, credibility, and practical implementation moving forward. So, with that overview of the review process, I would like now us to move into the next section of the webinar, the current status of the review process. In this section, we'll share some of the work completed so far during the assessment and drafting phase, including how input and evidence were gathered, some of the main learnings that emerged through the process, and how those insights help shape the proposed updates currently under consultation. This part of the process has been specifically important in ensuring that the proposed revisions are grounded not only in technical analysis and good international practices, but also in practical implementation experience and stakeholder perspective from across the coffee sector. Before we continue, we'd like to launch a second quick poll to better understand participants' familiarity with the Officer Code and the EM before joining to the session. So the question of our second poll is, before today, how familiar were you with the Officer Code and the Equivalence Mechanism? We'll give it a minute, some seconds to get answers. So more, no, not anymore. More, almost half of participants are very familiar with the Officer Code and Equivalence Mechanism, which is great. Almost 30% somewhat familiar, 25% heard of them but not sure, and a very, very small percentage of completely new. You're very welcome. The person that is here and this is super input, it's super available for us. So yeah, this is how we close this poll. Thank you very much for all your answers right now. We will move on. So this slide provides an overview of how initial input and evidence were gathered during the assessment phase of the review process. The work combines several different sources of evidence and stakeholder engagement activities to help build a broad and practical understanding of how the code and the EM were currently functioning. As you can see in the slide, we run 8 interviews with key stakeholders, 55 survey responses, 2 workshops with the International Trade Center, extensive desk research and documentation review, and so far 2 workshops with the Technical Committee and Advisory Task Force. In parallel, the process also includes a broader review of key documents, research, legislation, and sustainability trends like Regen Coffee and beyond the coffee sector. A detailed analysis was carried out on the 33 GCP recognized schemes, including implementation experiences, monitoring logs, and workshop discussions, helping identify practical lessons learned and recurring implementation themes. The review also included interviews with members of the Technical Committee, Advisory Task Force, recognized schemes, and other sector actors to better understand strengths, challenges, opportunities, and areas requiring further clarification or guidance. In addition, the team conducted a landscape analysis looking at evolving regulatory developments, sector expectations, and reference frameworks, helping ensure that the review remains aligned with emerging sustainability and due diligence discussions. Overall, the objective was to combine technical analysis with practical stakeholder perspectives and implementation experiences, creating a strong evidence base to support the proposed updates currently under consultation. This assessment and engaged process generate a number of important learnings and key takeaways that help shape the direction of the proposed updates currently under consultation. One of the strongest findings was a broad alignment around the overall direction and continued relevance of the co-officer code and the equivalence mechanism. Stakeholders generally confirmed that the baseline approach remains valuable and aligned with current sector expectations. At the same time, there was a strong feedback around the need to improve clarity, usability, and consistency of interpretation, particularly in helping users better understand how requirements should be applied in practice. Importantly, many of the identified gaps were not necessarily about changing the core requirements themselves, but rather about strengthening guidance and implementation support around the tools. Another major takeaway was the importance of maintaining practicality and context sensitivity. Stakeholders emphasized the need to balance evolving regulatory expectations and due diligence approaches with the realities faced by farmers and supply chain actors, while avoiding overly prescriptive or thick box approaches. The analysis also highlighted a broader direction of travel across the sector towards stronger due diligence and risk-based approaches, meaning a greater focus on the connection between risk identification, actions taken, and monitoring of outcomes. Finally, stakeholders also reinforced the importance of maintaining credibility, transparency, and shared responsibility, while ensuring that the code and the EM continue to remain practical, relevant, and usable across different contexts and supply chain realities. It is also important to note that broader strategic topics raised during the process, such as shared responsibility and sustainability costs, that were captured for further consideration, even when they extend beyond the direct scope of this specific review process. So naturally, the next step was to translate those learnings and stakeholder input into the proposed updates currently included in the consultation drafts. One important point to highlight is that the overall approach of this review has been focused on refinement rather than redesign. In other words, the process is not aiming to fundamentally change the intent or the scope of the co-officer code or the equivalence mechanism, but rather to strengthen and improve them based on implementation experience, stakeholder feedback, and evolving sector expectations. Across both tools, this has included improving clarity and structure, strengthening guidance and implementation support, providing clearer interpretation of requirements and responsibilities, and improving alignment with due diligence approaches and emerging sustainability expectations. For the code specifically, the updates continue reinforcing its role as a shared baseline for sustainable coffee, while maintaining a strong emphasis on continuous improvement. For the EM, some of the updates are more pronounced, particularly around governance, transparency, data integrity, and clear expectations for scheme owners. But overall, the intention is to ensure that both tools remain credible, usable, practical, and responsive to the realities and expectations of today's coffee sector. So this slide highlights some of the main directions reflected in the proposed updates of the code. One of the central elements is continued emphasis on continuous improvement, maintaining the co-officer code as a shared baseline for sustainability coffee rather than a prescriptive certification standard. There was also strong support through the assessment process for maintaining a risk-based and context-driven approach. This is important to help ensure that the code remains flexible and applicable across different production realities and geographic contexts, while avoiding overly rigid or one-size-fits-all approaches. Another key area reflected in the proposed updates is a stronger alignment with due diligence approaches and evolving regulatory and sector expectations. This includes reinforcing the logic around risk assessment, actions, and monitoring, while still maintaining a practical and farmer-centric approach to implementation. Overall, the proposed revision aims to strengthen clarity, usability, and implementation support, while preserving the core intent and structure of the co-officer code. And importantly, many of the detailed inputs received through the assessment and engagement process were addressed through refinements of the draft, expanded guidance, and further considerations for future developments beyond this specific review cycle. This slide highlights some of the main directions reflected in the proposed updates for the equivalence mechanism. Overall, stakeholders responded positively to the clearer structure and organization of the updated EM draft, while also reinforcing strong support for maintaining DM as a baseline recognition mechanism built around transparency and comparability, rather than a tier recognition model. A major area of focus through the review has been strengthening governance, transparency, and data integrity, including clearer expectations around disclosure, accountability, and responsibilities of the scheme owners. The review also reflects a stronger orientation towards risk and due diligence-based approaches, moving beyond purely ticking boxes, compliance models, and placing greater emphasis on implementation, monitoring, and continuous improvement. Another recurring theme for stakeholders was the importance of practical guidance and usability, recognizing that implementation realities and legal context can differ significantly across schemes and producing countries. Finally, the discussion also generated reflections around future development needs, including continuous improvement approaches, monitoring system, and stronger oversight mechanism moving forward. With that overview of the key proposed updates for both the code and the EM, I would now like to invite Alice Saus from the Advisory Task Force to share a new reflection from their perspectives on the review process and the proposed revisions.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Ali Staus, calling in from the United States today. I represent Keurig Dr. Pepper, and I have had the privilege to participate in the advisory task force group that is tasked with really providing this input and advisory support through the review process of the code and the equivalence mechanism. So I've been asked to kind of discuss today what the reflections are around the process, but also to help encourage you all to put some skin in the game and also contribute to this effort. I mean, ultimately, these tools are only as powerful as they are useful. And all of us on the line are really committed and invested in ensuring that coffee continues to be growable into the future. And, you know, when these tools were initially published several years ago, it really transformed the way that the industry thought about sustainable, responsible sourcing. It gave us this common language, and that was a huge step. But like I said, these tools are only as powerful as they are useful, as they are practical. So this process of kind of refreshing and revising the tools has been a really great experience. You know, ultimately, we want the tools to remain relevant. The coffee industry has really evolved quite a lot over the last 5 years. Climate change is ramping up. The market has fluctuated massively. Regulations are coming online that were not even conceived of 5 years ago that the industry needs to respond to. So the tools also need to adapt and be updated in order to maintain relevance in the current marketplace. They also need to be practical. They need to be not arduous to use. They need to be clear in guidance. And there are opportunities to kind of improve on building out those clear guidance points, which is part of what the group has been taking on is really distilling how can we make these as practical, as clear as possible. And then, of course, they need to be representative of the full industry. You know, we are doing our best as an advisory task force to be as representative and inclusive as possible, to think through all angles of a proposed criteria and make sure that we're maintaining farmer centrism at the core of our work. But ultimately, you know, we are limited in our perspectives. We're only representing one company each. And it's important that we extend that perspective building and intake process across the whole industry so that these tools are as credible and representative as possible. So that's our call to you all today. Happy to take any questions at the end if you have them alongside my colleagues from the GCP, but just wanted to share that insight and perspective into why this process is really important and why a company like KDP is really invested in seeing the value in this review process. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Ali, for these words. Pretty relevant. Thank you very much once again. So, to move on, so far we focus on the review process itself, the assessment work completed, and the main insights and proposed updates emerging from that process. We'll now move into the next major section of today's webinar, the public consultation phase, including what's being consulted, the materials that are going to be available, and most importantly, how stakeholders can engage and provide feedback through the consultation period. So today, May 19, 2026, we're officially launching the 30-day public consultation for the review of the co-officer code and the equivalence mechanism. Through the consultation, we're inviting stakeholders from across the coffee sector and beyond to review the proposed updates, share expertise and practical perspectives, and help strengthen the relevance, clarity, and credibility of both tools. This consultation is a very important part of the overall review process because it helps ensure that the final review tools are informed by a broad range of experiences, realities, and technical perspectives from across the coffee sector. Your input during this phase will directly support the next stage of analysis, review, and refinement of the co-officer code and the EM. And in the next slides, we'll walk you through the consultation toolkit, timelines, and different ways you can participate and provide feedback. So now I'd like to walk you briefly through the consultation toolkit itself, since this is really the core package of materials supporting the public consultation process. All materials are available through the GCP website, and together they are intended to help stakeholders understand the proposed updates and provide informed and practical feedback through the consultation period. The toolkit includes several components. First, we have the consultation draft itself, which is the detailed Excel file that contains the proposed updates for both the co-officer code and the equivalence mechanism requirements. Given its technical nature and structure, this document is only available in English. Then we have the summary of changes, which is a more accessible and user-friendly document highlighting the key proposed updates and the rationale behind them. This document is available in multiple languages to support broader accessibility and participation. We also will have the webinar slides and a short video, which provides an overview of the review process, the proposed updates, and guidance on how to navigate the consultation materials. And finally, of course, the consultation surveys themselves, which will be the main mechanism for collecting structured stakeholder feedback through the whole consultation period. So this slide gives you a quick visual overview of the main consultation materials you'll be working with during the consultation period. Each resource reserves a slightly different purpose, depending on how deeply you would like to engage with the review. The consultation draft is the detailed technical document that contains the full proposed revisions of the code and the EM. This is where participants can explore the exact wording and structure of the proposed updates in more details. The summary of changes is really the best starting point for most participants. It provides a more accessible overview of the proposed updates and helps quickly identify what has changed and why. The consultation surveys are the formal mechanism for submitting your feedback. The surveys combine structured questions with opportunities to provide written comments and additional perspectives. You can provide high-level feedback using the main survey, which contains multiple choice questions and optional open boxes for written feedback. Or you can use the technical survey, which allows participants to share specific feedback on specific requirements, sections, and/or the structure of both tools. And finally, the webinar materials and consultation video are there to support your understanding of the process, timelines, and the consultation approach. So once again, all consultation materials are available through the GCP website. We will share with you some information about this in the coming slides. Stakeholders are encouraged to review the materials, discuss them internally within your organizations or networks if relevant, and submit feedback through the consultation service during the consultation period. Participation can happen at different levels depending on the interest and expertise of each stakeholder. Some participants may choose to focus on broader strategic reflections, while others may provide some detailed technical comments on specific sections of the code or the equivalence mechanism. We also encourage stakeholders to help disseminate the consultation materials across their own networks and partners to support broad and diverse participation through the process. The consultation will remain open until June 19, 2026, and all timelines, materials, and participation links can be accessed directly through the consultation webpage that we will share with you in the coming slides. So, very important, since there are several consultation materials available, we also wanted to make the navigation process as clear and practical as possible for stakeholders. So the recommended approach is to first start with the summary of changes, which provides this quick and accessible overview of the proposed updates and the main areas under the review. From there, stakeholders can use the document alongside the consultation draft to explore the detailed requirements and proposed changes in greater depth. We are also encouraging participants to focus specifically on the sections that are most relevant to their own work, expertise, or area of interest. The idea is not necessary for everyone to review every single requirement in detail, but rather to provide meaningful and informed feedback in the areas where they can contribute most effectively. After reviewing the materials, stakeholders can then submit feedback through the consultation service. And here we have an important clarification. The guidance included within the documents is there to support understanding and interpretation of the requirements, but the guidance itself is not formally part of the consultation scope. The consultation is focused specifically on the proposed requirement updates. With that, we've now reached the discussion section of today's webinar. Before moving into the next slides, I'd like to pause and address some of the questions that might already be coming through the chat. And of course, we would also welcome reflections, comments, or questions directly from participants. So if you would like maybe to intervene or to speak aloud, please feel free to use the raise hand function, and we'll open the floor for our discussion. I will stop sharing my screen during our Q&A.
Gabriel, right now we have actually no questions in the chat. Either it was also clear or everyone's a little bit stunned taking it all in.
We are very aware. This is a bunch of information. We're very aware of it, but it doesn't matter if you still have a single very specific question. They're very welcome right now.
It could be a comment as well, because we know we have a broad set of stakeholders from producers to end users and a lot of scheme owners on the call. So feel free, if you just, as Gabriel said, raise your hand. Oh, Kate has raised her hand, so that would be great. Just unmute and let us know what's on your mind.
Yeah, hi. How's my audio? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe introduce yourself real quick when you take on the mic.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kate Montero, I'm Falcon Coffee's head of global sustainability. Nice to be with y'all this morning. I started typing, Gabrielle, and then it was taking too long, so better to talk. I wanted to actually pose a question, maybe to the speakers, but also to the audience, specifically around how we communicate about the equivalence mechanism and the reference code to people outside of GCP. And I say that specifically because to use an American phrase, I've drunk the Kool-Aid on GCP's equivalence mechanism. I think it's a really powerful industry tool for thinking about the dozens of different sustainability schemes that are out there in coffee and trying to find ways to harmonize those. And I think it has incredible potential as other people consider what's out there from their various supply chains. That said, I feel that when I'm talking to someone that's not a GCP member, they do not know what I'm talking about. And each time I'm more than happy to explain it to them because I get really excited about the fact that there is an equivalence mechanism out there. And I think it has incredible potential. But I'm wondering, as a conversation starter, maybe one, do other people find this? And two, is there a part of this new process that we're going through now that we could either add or modify, or maybe it exists and I'm not aware, and if so, forgive me, about how we think about press and marketing and communications for this in this next cycle? Because I would love to find ways to not only pass this along to commercial roasters that are using this, but also find ways to include it with maybe smaller roasters that want to make an impact on the ground and partner with people that are using schemes that they may not be familiar with, like the rainforests and the fair trades, but are still equally as important and doing just as a great amount of impact, right? Oh, thanks, Allie. So I'll stop there. I'm rambling, but I just want to throw that out there. Is there a way that we can do a big PR push or marketing or comms over the period of this time to pull more people in, to let them understand that this is out there? You know, do we have everyone that is equivalent start using the GCP logo, like get the image out there, have people know and have a visual cue as to the fact that they are harmonized by this scheme? That's all I got. Thank you.
Great, Kate. And you saw that Allie kind of pushed that, or said that love the push, and then Claire, who is the communications person in GCP. So I would definitely would like GCP to kind of respond, but this came through from an advisory task force as well. So that's why there is an advisory task force to help bring up these type of questions. And they were also this fact that it's an education process that we need to bring others on. And so it can't be just the technical. We really need to look at those aspects. And I think with the maturity of now, since we are in a second cycle, we actually have a bit more space to do that. Whereas the last one was kind of almost something new. So we were focused so much on just getting that. So I think there is there's a demand for that, and there is a response for that. I don't know if Claire or someone from GCP wants to also chime in on this, because it's definitely has been heard, and I think it is in the pipeline.
Sure. Thanks, Amy, and thanks very much, Kate, for making the comment. It's such an important one. My name's Claire from GCP. I am the communications manager, and communicating on this topic is a big challenge, as you'll know. But that's also why we are here, and it's so wonderful to see voices, people willing to lend their voices to this process so that we can not only enhance and enrich and drive the EM and the Coffee SOR code forward, but also find different ways to share it. So moving into this next phase, as Amy has sort of mentioned, with the maturity of this process, we are very keen to collaborate with our members, partners, and with the sector at large in different ways to find ways to reach different audiences and to speak the language that they want to hear it in. I think we often are sort of cornered to speak in a very specific way to a very particular audience, and by doing that we kind of exclude some others. So finding ways to speak to more people without diluting the message, which is critical for this because of the rigor, because of the amount of work that's been put in. We don't want to dilute anything at all. So how do we find ways to do that? So this is definitely we hear you, and I would love to continue this conversation further and find ways to do this, to push this out more. And yeah, looking forward to seeing what your responses are to the survey as a whole, as well as this entire process, and then to find out how we can amplify it, not only within our sector to really see impact on the ground, but also to those that haven't heard of GCP, as you've said. So thanks so much for that.
Fantastic. Lots of reactions to that one. So good. We have and I'm going to pass this one off to you, Gabrielle. I don't know if you've read it. Edison has written, he's the operation manager for Nespresso Brazil, and he kind of wanted to they're users of the pesticide list. And they're using it in their the GCP pesticide list. So he just want to kind of get an update on that, and also kind of provide feedback. So I think, Gabrielle, you can talk a little bit about that process of what we're doing with the pesticide list, that parallel process. And I think you'll be able to respond directly to his question about like, how can he actually contribute to that? So that would be great input.
Sure. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Edson, for your question. Yeah, we are very aware that pesticides, particularly the pesticides list, are a huge part of the code and therefore a huge part of the review process. We are working in parallel in the GCP pesticides lists. They are being part of the review process. They're going to be we're going to launch an updated version of both lists eventually. The thing is that this requires a more technical expertise, detailed job. So probably as this happens before in the 2021 review of the code back in the days, the updated version of the code was released not at the same time of the updated pesticides lists. And that's probably going to happen again because it requires a little bit more of time and efforts to get the new version of the lists. We are hearing this requirement on the list, not only from you, but from many stakeholders out there, which we're taking this with a lot of rigor and seriousness. That's, I guess, so far what we can tell you right now. We are working on it. It's in our radar, and new version is going to be released eventually, and we will keep you posted on the work that we have been, delivering on this.
Okay. And I can add something. We have a good database of about pesticides in Brazil. We have 2 years collecting each pesticide that our producers use it, and we have groups of discussion with these producers, so we can provide to you some insights. We can help you if you need with some database, some sites, some points that we think are important. So if has a way that we can help you, we want.
Thank you. No, this is super available. Thank you very much. I guess one very first nice step, it's to get through the service first, because we really want to hear from you on the service. But second, you were of course registered in the call, so I can reach you bilaterally and we can have a parallel discussion on it eventually. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Edson.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's exciting and nice to hear when people bringing solutions. We know that there's lots to do and lots of questions, but it's always it's more helpful if you have resources or you're willing to participate in this and step up. And that's again why I really have to say hats off to the Technical Committee and Advisory Task Force, because they have done a lot of work over the last several months behind the scenes. So I didn't see any other questions. Cesar, thank you, has raised his hand. I'll look in the chat and see if there's additional questions. And Cesar, thank you as well. As a longtime member of the Standing Committee, the Technical Committee, and a really important contributor, and seeing how many people we have from Brazil here on the call, he's kind of he's bringing that perspective on a regular basis. So thank you, Cesar.
Yes. Well, what I'd like to say to Edson is there is a pesticide action group as well, and usually we, along this group, we used to talk especially about the main pesticides, especially here in Brazil. Yeah? So we have this big list, and also we are always, especially me, I'm always worried about what's going to be banned, because we know that sometimes we need it after the use of other alternative controls. So we can talk later also, Edson. Take my contact as well. Then we can talk, and probably you can help us also in the pesticide action group that probably we are going to meet again to talk about the next pesticide list. Okay.
Okay, we like it. How I can take your contact?
I put here. I write on the meeting chat.
GCP will make sure that happens. And so to clarify for those, I'm in the camp of when Claire was talking about communications, I'm in the camp of often being very technical and I'm kind of wonky nerdy. So I apologies for that. The next part I want to say, for those on the call, there is still a requirement in the Coffee SR code about having pesticide lists. So a phase out list and a red list, prohibited and phase out list. That's the requirement. What's in that list is not up for public consultation right now because we realize that requires more the really technical expertise, the things that Edison was just talking about, Cesar and many others on the technical committee. And that's going to be a parallel process. So when you're doing the consultation, you're not approving a specific list. You're just saying you agreeing or you disagree about having a prohibited and a phase out list, and what's on those lists is going to be worked out by those technical experts, a broader group of technical experts. And this was done in the previous version as well, worked very successfully, because then you can do those deep dives with those that have the knowledge, that bring those resources that was just talked about. So just to clarify for those on the call, that's a separate process, but it feeds into it. So we can still move forward with the Coffee SR code and parallel have those more deep dive technical discussions. So I hope I didn't lose everyone with that explanation. Great. Wanted to see, I don't see any hands raised. And Cesar put himself in contact. Anyone else there? There's a lot of callers here from Brazil if you wanted to get some insights from a technical committee member. And then Claire had mentioned in the chat there about the recording and all the toolkits will be provided to you. I think it's already live because there was a webinar earlier. So is there any other questions, comments, suggestions? We're always open to suggestions. The communications is one that's come up just now. Is there other suggestions? You can, right now, if you would like to raise them as a follow-up and or you can provide that in the survey. But we really do want to make sure that this is all accessible to you, which means, that you can access it, but you can understand what we're trying to do. And this is a super critical time for the sector for sure. So thank you in advance for your inputs. See, I don't see any other. Cesar raised his hand again. Great. That's good.
Emily, thanks. No, I would like to say that I saw that about 35 of our who are here and on this meeting are representing producers. So I would like to ask them, because I represent the producers in the technical committee as well. So I would like to ask these 35 people who are here to really involve on this consultation as a producer side, because I think it's very good for all of us to be here representing producers, because by the end, they are centric. So that's why we are here as well. So please help us on this consultation timing, okay?
Direct appeal to those producers. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Cesar. And obviously, Cesar has put his contact in there. So if you had any questions on anything, then you know who you can contact. So great. You can obviously always contact GCP. So I don't see any other hands, so I'll turn it back over.
Thank you very much, Amy. Yeah, we're just 2 minutes away from our closing time. So, but we have another recent, Guillermo. Oh, Guillermo is here.
Yes,
Guillermo, please.
I'm here. We have sometimes a language barrier, especially with producers. And since Gabriel speaks fluent Spanish, we'll try to set up a Spanish seminar. I don't know if it's possible, Gabriel, for the Central American people, so they can contribute more actively. And we'll keep in touch with you later for that.
For sure. Jeremy?
Yeah, I just would like to take this opportunity to thank Amy and you, Gabrielle, and the whole team at the Global Coffee Platform, because it's been a huge amount of work that you've done in preparing these documents. We have our meetings and they last an hour or two and we make contributions, but you put a huge amount of effort into getting these materials out on time and ready. So I just want to express our thanks on behalf of the technical committee and the advisory task force and the whole coffee community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for those kind words. You're very welcome. Okay, I guess we shall continue. We're just 1 minute away. So I guess I'm going to go, yeah. So our next steps, very important, the consultation service are already open and ready for you to get your answers. All responses received during the consultation period will be reviewed, consolidated, and analyzed as part of the next revision phase. The main survey will take approximately 25 to 30 minutes to complete, depending on the level of detail that participants would like to provide, of course. And the technical survey takes as long as the person needs, of course. They will remain open until June 19. And we strongly encourage everyone not only to participate directly, but also to help disseminate the consultation materials and the survey links within your organization, networks, and partners to support broad and diverse participation across the sector. Here you can access now through the QR codes the main survey, which is here in English, but in GCP website you will find an available version in multiple languages. The technical survey, which is only available in English, and the GCP website, which contains the information around the review process and the consultation toolkits available in multiple languages as well. So I'll just give a minute for you to check it. I guess we can place this in the chat as well. Yes, it's in the chat too, so we can move on a little bit. Before we officially close, we also wanted to highlight a few upcoming opportunities where stakeholders can continue engaged with GCP and the review process over the coming months. These events and engagement spaces will provide additional opportunities to ask questions, exchange perspectives, and continue the conversation around the code, the equivalence mechanism, and broader sustainability discussions within the coffee sector. Finally, this slide highlights some of the broader GCP events and engagement opportunities that take place through the year. These events cover a range of sustainability topics and provide space for continued dialogue, knowledge exchange, collaboration, and sectoral alignment across different areas of GCP's work. And as highlighted at the bottom of the slide, if you're interested in participating more regularly in these activities and engagement spaces, you can also do it by becoming a GCP member. This is how we come to the end. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us today, for your time and engagement. We really appreciate your interest. Please remember to complete the service. Your input is super essential to shaping the next phase of this work, and we look forward to continue to dialogue with you. And thank you very much. Have a very good of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.